So Jake, first thing first, can you like introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, so my name is Jake Allen. I'm currently a minor league strength and conditioning coach for the New York Mets. This is my second season. I just finished here with the Mets. I spent about the first 5 or so years of my career actually coaching college basketball. So the 17-18 season, I was at the University of Missouri, where I interned under Nicodemus Christopher, one of the greatest human beings I've ever had the pleasure to meet. Still to this day, talk to him often. Consider him one of, again, the most important people I've ever met in my life. After that, I moved on to the University of Texas. I went down there as like a graduate intern, graduate assistant type. Um, I started off in the Olympic side of things. Spent about 3 months, like a summer kind of internship curriculum with them, where I primarily worked with like soccer, women's tennis, swim and dive. And then after that, I transitioned back over to men's basketball. So I spent about 5 or 6 months working under Daniel Roos there, who's now at VCU men's basketball. And then I got the opportunity to go down to the University of Houston, where I was the assistant for the men's basketball program for almost 2 years, almost under Alan Bishop, before transitioning over to the men's baseball program, where I took over as the head guy. So I did that for about another year and a half, and then I made the move to professional sports, where I've been with the Mets for the past 2 seasons since. So it's
Cool.
been kind of a journey all across the country, but that's what this profession is all about, I guess, huh?
Cool. So, between basketball and baseball, which sport do you like the most?
Man, there's pros and cons to each. Obviously, basketball, you got the smaller roster sizes. You're dealing with maybe some of the most freak athletes. So and at the end of the day, most of them, not all of them, most have very low training ages when they get to us at the college setting. So honestly, the most simple things, just mastering the basics really with them is going to kind of be what really drives the needle for a while. When you get to baseball, it's a completely different demographic. So from my experience, a lot of the athletes I've had at the college level already had a pretty solid background in training. Um, so then you got to worry about, okay, who do they come, who are they training under? Who were their, personal trainers or strength coaches in high school before they got there? Or were they JUCO guys who were kind of just let loose and, would go to the rec and do, the old, bro splits, bodybuilding style workouts. Then we got to have to break that mold. Um, and then you get the, professional level, from my experience, it's just kind of been, a little bit of mix. I got some college guys who come from some very, very, very good, strength programs. Got a couple kids from, LSU, Texas, Washington State, Kentucky, who have, some very good training backgrounds, Florida. And then, I got some kids, some of the more like, younger Latin players, international players, who, when they sign with us, they have zero exposure to any kind of strength training program until they kind of get to our academy. So they're still, when they get to my level, they're still a lot of times very, very raw. So definitely have a mixed bag. And, basketball players, I like to say I have to chase them sometimes, a lot of times to get them to come to the weight room. Or baseball players, a lot of times I have to push them out of the weight room and get them to do less work. So you got kind of polar opposites there. Um, so it's not really, I guess, the answer to the question as far as which one do I like better. But there's just pros and cons to each. So
Nice. I love that. Actually, one of my colleague right now, he used to work with baseball. So this is from what he said, and I quote, he said that baseball player, besides football, baseball player are the most strongest athlete he ever trained. I was like, is it? Okay.
yeah, I mean, I've seen obviously a lot of freaks within track and field. Um, I've seen a lot of freaks. I've never personally worked with hockey or wrestling, but I've been around some hockey players and wrestlers and those, and some gymnasts too. I think gymnasts are some of the most underrated strength athletes there are. But no, baseball players I think are more kind of that meathead style. They just love to come in, just get after, just be bros,
Yeah.
be so. That's obviously fun for me. A fellow meathead myself.
Nice. So, um, besides like the baseball and basketball, this is personally I want the question I want to ask. How much is your back squat PR and like deadlift?
Man, all time, not in the competition. I've hit a back squat about 560. And I've hit a deadlift with straps. I've gone 675. Without straps, I've gone 650.
Oh, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. But that was out of competition. In competition, I'm still trying to get my 1500 total, which will qualify me for nationals, which is my end goal. Not end goal, but current goal.
To
So,
do powerlifting.
yeah.
That was cool. That was
Yeah.
cool.
So that's what one of my personal goals, at least.
Do you think that like this is just personally I want. Do you think like that like run those like powerlifting program to help us as a strength and conditioning coach to like help us get our athletes stronger?
Oh, for sure. I think the more diverse that we can become, the better. Like I think we should be able to take something from every different realm of athletics and performance and blend them together and to make our own individualized kind of philosophies and programs. Um, so yeah, 100%. I think that my personal training in powerlifting, my following these programs, I'm employing other coaches. That's the thing too for me. Like I go out and I try to get other coaches to program for me, so I can feel and get the idea of okay, like you know, I may have read my program one way. I want something else. I want to see a different idea, a different belief, mindset, different philosophies and methods to go about achieving the same end goal. And I think for me, that's really kind of helped me develop a lot more of an open mind. And really, I think it's benefited my actual program and coaching for my athletes as well.
Nice. Based on your answer, I kind of want to do the squat toper right now.
Yeah, I'm taking a pass this year. I think it's been maybe 3 years since I've done Squattober. I
Oh,
did,
is it?
yeah, I think I went 2 years in a row. Um, I think it was, yeah, the last time I did it was, yeah, I was at Texas. Actually, it was fun. We did it with the whole staff, the basketball staff, myself, Coach Roos I mentioned earlier, who's the head, Tyler Janota, who was the assistant at the time there. Now he's at, Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky, sorry. No, Northern Kentucky. Sorry, Tyler, if you're watching this, sorry, man. I think it's Northern Kentucky. But and then we had our athletic trainer as well. So we had a good solid group. And then Zach Zillner, who's the women's basketball coach down there, was participating too. So it's fun when you have a group. At least I thought it was fun as a group. Right now, it's just not conducive to my goals. So taking a pass.
Cool. So, um, besides like which one you like the most, can you like um describe the game needs? How is the game different from basketball to baseball?
Oof. Yeah. So I think that kind of I thought you were going to ask how do I train differently, which I'm glad you didn't. But I think that's a better question the way you worded it. Um, because to me, how I train my athletes, at least in the weight room, is especially at the level I work with, whether it's college or the low level minor leagues with these younger guys who are basically college age. A lot of times, my actual like strength programming doesn't vary a whole lot. Obviously, you know the um, the nuances, injury prevention standpoint. That's where we'll kind of get into it. Where as far as obviously with baseball, where we got to do more stuff to avoid aggravating the elbow and the shoulder. Basketball, obviously, we're worried about ACLs and protecting the knees at all costs. So there's gonna be a little bit of stuff specific to those needs of the sport. But when it comes down to it, obviously the energy system demands are vastly different from baseball to basketball. So that's gonna be the biggest thing, especially in the off season. Like right now, our off season just began, so we're just going back to the basics of energy system development and trying to just reestablish that aerobic base. But obviously, when we get closer to season, it's such a anaerobic power based sport where obviously basketball is more that repeat effort, which I mean baseball is more the repeat effort, whereas basketball is obviously you got to have such a just enormous engine, right, just to be able to survive those long games, those grueling practices and whatnot. So that's really kind of where the difference for me lies is really that energy system development. To be honest, like Because when it comes down to it, to me, training is training. I don't do anything too crazy for the most part until my guys get to a really advanced level. But kind of that off season point where we're at now is where kind of the difference really kind of shows. Where all right, what energy system we're going to develop, and then where are we going to? What's our end goal? Where are we going to get to by the time season rolls around?
Nice, nice. So, the next thing is like when it comes to like baseball has such a long season.
Mm-hmm.
How 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 would you program the in season versus off season weight training?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So me personally, how I like to plan out my year, my annual plan, the off season, I would say it's more of a traditional kind of. It depends on of course, it depends on the athlete and where they're at in their development. But I would go for typically, I would say it looks more like a traditional linear periodization phase, or with the phases. And then obviously, as we're getting, so right now we're just kind of that, building that GPP, aerobic base, that, work capacity phase. Then, go into, more of that traditional hypertrophy, then a strength and a power prior to the season. Nothing fancy for at least the guys that I'm working with at my level. And for the most part, in season, I will, again, it depends on the athlete, depends on their playing schedules. If they're a pitcher or a position player, obviously starting pitchers are on more of a strict anywhere from 5 to 7 day rotation based on what team and how our manager and pitching coaches are going to operate. So I actually like to do more of like a undulated periodization throughout the week with them, to where let's say it's a starting pitcher, I'll try to do a heavy strength session. Typically, I'll try to do it that same day after they get done pitching, so I can keep their high days high and really kind of consolidate the stress to one day if possible. Some guys, because obviously down here in Florida, it gets extremely hot. If a guy pitches 5, 6, 7 innings and he just completely toast, we're going to get nothing out of it. I'll push the lift to the next day. And for me, having that full week cycle, it's not going to be the end of the world. But then obviously, as we get closer to their next outing, they have a bullpen kind of somewhere either 2 or 3 days out from their next start. That's where I'll hit more of like a dynamic effort style session with them. And then a lot of not a, I would say my more advanced pitchers, I will do kind of like a day before, or some of them even a day of, like almost like a primer, like a CNS kind of 15-minute, 20-minute top, come in, hit 2 or 3, almost like a French contrast style, session. And then, 2 or 3 really quality, high power output sets, and then get them out. So that's kind of how I do it throughout the week with my pitchers. With my hitters and position players, again, it's going to vary based on their, individual playing schedule. If we have a guy who's playing, 4, 5, 6 days a week, basically I'll kind of undulate it throughout the season. I like to use our force plates tell me a lot, based on the counter movement jumps. So if a guy jumps, prior to a session and he PRs, all right, cool. Let's take advantage. You're in a good spot. Let's get after it today. If the CMJ is down a little bit, usually anywhere from 5 to 10%, I'll start kind of cutting sets. If it's below 10%, we'll reconsider if I actually want to train him that day or give him that day and just, hey, let's circle back tomorrow and see where we're at. Try to push him to the training room, really kicks out that recovery process, get him ready for that game that night. But again, I try to use velocity-based training in season a lot to kind of monitor where they're at. And that way I know, all right, hey, I want to hit strength for these next 2 weeks. Obviously, we know, someone's 1 RM, can fluctuate. Obviously, the literature says different things, but it can fluctuate, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 20%, somewhere within that range on a day-to-day basis. So I don't care if, it might be, whatever it is that I'm trying to train. We know that the velocity-based training is telling us we're actually getting that sessions worth by following those parameters. And then kind of like I said, usually every 2 weeks or so, I'll kind of follow a different goal, unless we have a guy, who's just comes completely underweight or undersized, and he just needs to get bigger, stronger. Then obviously I'll modify and adjust for him accordingly, or vice versa. If I have a guy who is just extremely big, powerful, are extremely big and strong. We need to really get him, powerful and moving fast. Then obviously we'll adjust from there. But for the most part, like I said, at my level of low A this past 2 seasons, I don't need to get too fancy with my methods. Really, just kind of keep it simple. Make sure they stay consistently training through the season, and we've seen some great results from that.
Nice, nice. So, um, since you brought up like force play testing, counter movement jump, basketball player are crazy, yeah, like a vertical jump. They are crazy vertical.
Yep.
And I don't know that much of about baseball player, but like when we were training our basketball player, our goal is like during the offseason, our goal is mainly like train them to like jump higher.
Mm.
But baseball is a sport that probably I don't know, probably don't need match that much of a vertical. So uh is it different from this standpoint? Is it gonna be different for programming?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily looking for the actual vertical jump height as much as the actual CMJ impulse and the amount of actual power that they're creating. Um, and obviously, it takes into account body weight. Like a guy who's 250 pounds, but just because he's fat and overweight, his impulse, will be, naturally higher than someone who's 150 pounds at an equal strength level. Um, don't quote me on that, but it'll be obviously, he has the advantage, just because the sheer mass. So, but that's the thing. I look at the trends over time. Yeah, there's been a lot of studies that have shown direct correlation between lower body power output and both exit velocity for hitters and throwing velocity for pitchers. So I look at that metric, the actual CMJ impulse and power output, than I do necessarily the vertical jump height, for these guys. I look at a lot at also like the eccentric braking impulses. And then I use it a lot for my, looking at asymmetries. So the four sticks, that we use, they show us, right to left, both on takeoff and landing, any asymmetries. So it's great for, especially any, return to play protocols I may have, or, kind of determining, all right, hey, we have a big, asymmetry, from right to left on this guy. All right, let's really focus more, maybe on single leg landings, or, maybe we're taking out, for the next block of training, taking out bilateral squats, and we're throwing in only, unilateral variations of the movement. So that's kind of how I look at the CMJ, and I kind of, honestly, for me, that's probably the least important metric personally for baseball players. It's not something that just completely throw aside, but for me personally, I look at other metrics before the actual vertical jump height.
Cool. So I know you already mentioned that in season you're probably gonna use like game deadlift prior or like the game, like after the game. Besides like the game deadlift, are you gonna like while using the game deadlift, are you gonna like still gonna progress like some try to periodize it like um I don't know, like block periodization or like undulate, try to get them stronger through the season, or like just try to maintain their strength level, keep them healthy.
Yeah, no, obviously keeping them healthy is number one priority, number one goal all year round for me. But at the same time, no, I still, especially with how long the baseball season is, we started spring training starts, beginning in March, and I just ended my season, 2 weeks ago in September with the major leagues, just ending, this past weekend with playoffs starting. So, if you don't try and see some kind of gains, whether it's strength, power, or a combination of the two, or whatever else that individual athlete might need, um, to me, you're wasting, half of the year, especially at my level, half the year, very important time for them to develop, as an athlete, as a baseball player. So yeah, we're still seeking gains in strength. We're still seeking gains in power. We just got to be strategic of how we go about it. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is still baseball for these guys. That's what they're getting paid to do, is play baseball. So I never want to do anything that's going to be detrimental to their on-field performance. So it is kind of, it's a precious, kind of like theatrical, type thing that we got going on with, trying to balance out, the weight room stuff, the on-field, movement skill stuff I'm doing with them, whether it's speed, acceleration session, etc. Like making sure that the stress that I'm putting on their bodies at the end of the day is not adding unneeded stress or unnecessary stress that's going to eventually take away from them on field.
Cool. So, uh, I'm gonna uh ask another question. Uh, Baseball is like pitcher or like position player. They're gonna need to throw the ball a lot. So how exactly to like build up a I know it's possible. I know it's impossible, but how to build up a bulletproof shoulder?
And so I this past season I was very very fortunate to work with a very very talented and very intelligent athletic trainer, Anthony Oliveri. Um, so he has a phenomenal arm care routine that he has developed. He's worked with the major league team up in New York in the past, and basically every level between. And so I relied heavily on him. He taught me a ton. But then we would sprinkle in some stuff. Like there were some of the guys just don't go to the training room as much as they should. So they're not getting as much out of the, phenomenal resources that, he had provided. The rest of the organization, hasn't, provided for these pitchers and position players too, to prevent, their shoulder injuries. So in those instances, we would, implement more stuff in their, whether it's their prep routine or their actual training program, maybe like at the end, I have a guy who maybe, let's say he lacks, stability in, an overhead, abducted state or whatever it may be, So, we throw in some kind of variation, whether it's a, loaded carry, just to kind of make sure that we're kind of getting in what he's not getting in by doing, the stuff that we had already put in place through our, the rest of our performance department. But really, to me, it comes down to just having a very, very solid, holistic program put in place. And if you do that, then, you should be able to avoid a lot of, shoulder issues, elbow issues. You're never going to completely eliminate them. Just like, with working with, your athletes, like you could have the best program ever concocted. There's still a chance that someone, unfortunately, knock on wood, but there's still a chance someone's going to blow out an ACL. That's just the nature of high level athletics. We're stressing these bodies as much as we can to try to get as most out of it as we can. And unfortunately, at times they're going to break. But yeah, I think if you have a very sound, holistic approach to your program, and that starts from their prep routine to their training routine to their post game arm care routine to their recovery routine to their make sure the nutrition locked in, all the stuff that we know is important from that standpoint. That's going to have a bigger role, I think, than just saying, okay, this is what I do specifically in the weight room. I think it's got to be a whole encompassing attack from the whole performance department.
Well, can you like give us some example that probably you learned from the athletic trainer?
Um, yeah, I mean, it was more so just kind of what I really learned from him was really kind of, so he periodizes out throughout the week, just like I was talking about earlier with my weight training. He does a really good job of kind of planning that out, and really kind of changing the amount of stress that he's applying and where he's applying it to in the shoulder capsule, based on the kind of different loads and demands that the pitchers are undergoing, whether it's a start, for a starting pitcher, whether it's starting that night. Okay, this is what they're doing that night afterwards. Again, kind of like I mentioned, try to keep the high stress days high. So that will be a relatively heavy arm care day for them after their game. And then obviously then you kind of trickle down a little bit as you get closer to the bullpen. Bullpen will again kind of be a more taxing recovery day for them, and then you kind of ease back off as they get closer to the next outing. So that was kind of what I really took away from him, was just kind of how he goes about that, which was something that, from my experience in college, obviously, we're only playing 3 or 4 days a week, and it's all consolidated down into the weekend. So we weren't as concerned about that, spread out over the course of the week. So kind of going in the year two of professional baseball from the college transition, that was kind of the big thing I took away from him, was how he plans out the whole week, not just those 3 or 4 days over the weekend like I was used to in college.
Cool. Cool. So, I know you talk a little bit like about force plate testing, but still, more load management is like a huge topic right now. So for like baseball, sorry, for basketball or like for I know American football, I know soccer, there's like Kinexon, there's like Catapult GPS data. But for baseball, do you guys use like any GPS data or like just force plate to track or to know how where our athletes are right now?
Yeah, we're so we have a phenomenal sports science department here. Jackson Bertoli is the director, coordinator of minor league sports science here with the Mets, and he's phenomenal. One of the best I've ever been around. And so we use this past 2 seasons I've been here, we use Stat Sports for our GPS system. And yeah, we have the GPS units on our guys, our position players, um, every second of pretty much every activity they're doing from the time they get to the stadium. They're doing on-field activity until the game ends. So we're tracking their entire day's worth of baseball work, and then I would get a daily report with their overall workload. You look at their acute to chronic workload. Where they're at, if they need more work, if they need less work, kind of how to go from there. Then that's my responsibility then to communicate that to our baseball staff and try to figure out a plan of, okay, hey, this player, he's down. Maybe he missed 3 days because he tweaked something. All right, well now I gotta work with our baseball staff to get his extra work up to where he's in a safe spot, because we know that once you fall below, a certain, acute to chronic workload ratio puts you at higher risk for soft tissue injury. Actually, the lower you are, you're at a higher risk than if you were above, the certain ratio. So that's how we utilize it. And then we also keep track of, high speed sprint exposures and make sure that, we're keeping guys basically soft tissues safe by making sure that, the frequency of those are staying up. Again, might be a guy who might be only playing once or twice a week. So if he's not, getting his, max top end speeds through games or early work, then, I'll take him at some point and make sure that we're keeping him on track for that to keep him healthy, or as much as I can keep him healthy.
Nice, nice. So, uh, I'm gonna just jump into the another topic is about like core training. So I know baseball, there's a lot of like rotation, tons of rotation. So as a strength coach, how would you program their like rotation or anti-rotation or like explosiveness? And can you kind of explain it like how would you program it during the off season and during the in season? There's so much going on. Would you change anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So when I look at rotational power, um, I like to kind of break it down into multiple, aspects. So first off, for me, I look at the overall structure of the athlete first. So if there's any kind of deficiency, whether it's dorsiflexion, bilateral hip IR, lack of T-spine rotation, in one way or both ways, we really got to hone in and correct those by either, getting them extra, movement stuff in their prep routines, or throwing in more correctives, maybe at the beginning or end of their lifts, or maybe it's like a superset. Because if you can't move efficiently, it doesn't matter how much strength you have, you're not going to be able to display that power, in any plane of motion, but especially if we're talking rotational power. So that's kind of the number one thing for me, is making sure that they're, in alignment and can, be anatomically, I guess, move well. After that, then we go up and, I look at force production. Where's the guy, how does he test out in our strength test? Is he, but if I were just to attack straight power movements, am I kind of missing the boat on, continue to fill that strength bucket that maybe he needs, for the next couple months or maybe longer? Um, and then kind of once he gets past that baseline level of strength, then we can kind of get more specific with actual rotation. Not saying I don't train rotation with every baseball player. To an extent, I do, especially in the off season. But to me, again, it comes back to, if you can't dominate the basics. So if you can't dominate the frontal plane or the sagittal or the sagittal plane or frontal plane, that's what makes up rotational movement. So I want to be strong in both of those, and I want to be powerful in both of those. And then we become more specific with rotation. Again, not saying I don't train rotation along with those, but I look at kind of trying to dominate those two first and master those two first, and then we kind of really focus more. It's like my advanced level guys on that true rotational based programs. Now, I do again. There is at some point in the off season. Right now, we're not really doing a ton of rotational power stuff. We're doing a lot of anti-rotation, and then we'll start working more into rotational stuff, rotational power specifically, as we get closer to the season. Then, as you mentioned, there is so much going on in the season. They are taking hundreds and hundreds of swings and throws each week. So I try and limit the amount of rotation they're doing. I don't completely take it out of the program, but I look at it as similar to what I did with like my jumps and my ground contact with basketball, right? As the season increases, the demands of the season increase, so do their ground contacts. So from a training standpoint, I would reduce those just like I would reduce my overall rotation work with a baseball player as the season increases and the rotational demands increase. And that's kind of how I periodize it, I guess, throughout the year.
Nice. I loved it. I loved it. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So, start from the basic like anti-rotation and progress through rotation and rotation power. And when it comes to like in season, trying to minimize it, but at the same time, they're so biased to one side. Are you gonna put in some work to the other to balance it, or
Yeah, I definitely train both sides. Um, we're I'm never chasing perfect symmetry, especially in a something like that where if we're talking jumping or sprinting, yeah, we recognize there most likely is going to be some kind of asymmetries, from one side to the other, um, and we want to kind of cut those down to reduce the risk of injury in a sport where a right-handed pitcher is never going to be asked to throw unless something completely crazy happens to throw it with his left arm and rotate that direction. It's important more so just from again, I'm big on structural balance, and so I like to try to keep the body as balanced as possible while still recognizing that um, there are going to be asymmetries, especially in a sport where you're constantly rotating to one side and never to the other. Um, so I am going to throw some stuff in there to balance it out, but I'm not necessarily super worried about, like if I'm trying to cut volume for some reason, like let's say, we're deloading a guy, maybe he came in, his CMJ's down. That to me, that's an easy way to cut some easy volume from his lift is to, hey, we got some med ball, work today. Maybe, we're only going to do it to your swing side or your pitching side. When I was kind of those, that's like French contrast style, neural prep circuit that I mentioned that I do with some of my pitchers the day of or day before the outings. I only, for a fatigue standpoint reason, I only have them do anything rotationally on their actual like dominant side just to kind of limit the overall volume that we're using. But if we're doing a true regular session, yeah, I'm going to attack both sides just for the simple goal of trying to get them to stay athletic and stay moving through as many different ranges and motions as possible.
nice? So, um, since at the beginning of our conversation we kind of talk about like baseball player being stronger than bat, not all, but most of the basketball player, like, um, and I saw a lot of like baseball player lift so heavy. So, um, is there is there gonna be like some certain like benchmark? I mean, two two times body weight should be easy for these guys, right?
I don't like to set hard benchmarks. Again, our sports science department has come up with some, collected a lot of data over the years to where we have, specific, measures that, kind of give us a guideline of where to take guys. But at the end of the day, we're also, I might have a guy who maybe let's say he's a center fielder who, the front office expects him to steal, 40 plus spaces a season. And he might be 185 pounds, where speed is the name of his game. And that's what, gets him paid. Where I might have a corner infielder or a catcher who, his game is power, and, hitting balls, 20, 30, 40 home runs a season. So I don't necessarily say, oh yeah, I want all my guys to be able to squat, 2.5 times body weight. To me, it's going to look back at what are their goals, what is their body type, what does the front office expect from them, and then from there, it's my job to establish what I think is the best parameter for them in order to get to where they need to be developmental wise. It's going to eventually help them reach their potential and maximize their potential on the baseball field.
Cool, cool. So, um, for rotational power, um, between like or like, do you like kind of if they're rotational, like let's say sequencing on right, are you gonna specifically correct them, or at that level of like high level athlete, at some point just you're gonna just let it slide?
Uh, it. I don't want to give you the answer, but I'm going to give you the answer. It depends.
I
Um,
got you.
it really does. I'm not a pitching coach. I'm not a hitting coach, so I don't ever want to act like I am trying to change or fix their mechanics. But what I can do is I can give them the tools that will help them clean something up that maybe their hitting coach or pitching coach identifies, and we can then maybe put specific movements that I think can help clean those movements up in their training plan. So, if a guy struggles with, hip shoulder separation, okay, then maybe I can do more stuff where, maybe we're doing stuff like a 3D strap and really focusing on, trying to improve that as part of maybe his, prep routine or something like that. Um, but if it comes to actual, and this is where, I feel like it takes us as performance coaches to develop those relationships with our sport coaches and, come up with the plans, break down some film. And again, we need to, that's why it's important for us to be at, as many practices and games as possible so we can watch these guys move and we can see what they may be deficient in. And then we can translate, what we do or what we see on the court or on the field and, into the weight room and have more of a transfer from there. So, yeah, I think there is definitely some stuff that we need to do if they lack sequencing. Um, but again, I'm going to do kind of drill specific towards maybe their deficiencies in a certain aspect. I'm not going to try and necessarily fix their pitching mechanics because, again, that's not my job. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. And trust me, I'm no pitcher. I'm definitely the guys make fun of me. They say I throw the baseball like a shot put, so I don't have much, if any, ER. So I'm not over here trying to give anybody any pitching advice.
Nice, nice. So, uh, for those who are familiar with rotational athletes, can you explain a little bit like what is hip shoulder separation?
Yeah, so it's basically, I mean, it's pretty much like the name says. It's, how much can you really kind of dissociate the lower body from the upper body and the trunk from the torso. So that's a big thing when it comes to, um, kind of that power, that rotational power. Because if you can think about like a hitter or a pitcher, when they plant that lead leg, if the longer they can keep their upper body back, the more torque they're going to be able to create, and therefore the more power they're going to have, and the more kind of potential energy they'll be able to sustain. If they can't keep the shoulders back or completely rotated or turned, not completely, but as much as possible, by the time that lead leg lands, they're losing out on a ton of potential power that they otherwise would be. So that's where kind of like I was saying earlier when I'm talking about like if I look at like a pyramid of rotational power and what it takes to development, that's why the very bottom of the pyramid to me is that movement and that kind of alignment that I mentioned earlier. Because if you're lacking in, let's say you're a right-handed pitcher, if you're lacking in left leg, hip ER, that's really going to have a detrimental effect on your ability to create that hip shoulder separation. So again, that's going to take away a lot of your potential rotational power. So I like to attack that. One of the first things I do if it's a necessity.
Cool, cool. So last thing before I let you go, okay? You're working with you're working at pro setting right now, which is like a lot of like strength coaches like dream job. And you used to work with college basketball. So how to like mm, get from the position you were to the position you are right now?
Man, a lot of patience, and just continue to kind of just work and grind and just, you know, be as perfect as you can be. I'm far from perfect. Don't get me wrong. Anybody listening to this, like, I'm not trying to say that I'm far from perfect. I got a long ways to go in a lot of aspects, coaching and non-coaching. Um, but I strive for perfection every single day, every single thing that I do, and I think really showing that you care, and that that work ethic, really shows people that you care. Strive to be one of, if not the first person in every single day, and one of, if not the last people to leave every day. Not because you're just there, because you want to be, or I do want to be. I love what I do, and I enjoy being around the guys and the coworkers and whatnot. But because you are trying to provide as much value as possible. So don't just stick in the weight room all day and just be the weight guy. Like, trust me, I'm a meathead through and through. Okay, anybody who knows me will tell you that, hands down, I'm a meathead to the core. But you know, I love the the guys, the camaraderie of the team, uh, and that's where you kind of really develop and create that buy-in from the guys is by hanging out with them in the players' lounge, in the kitchen, in the dugout, or on the bench, in the cages, the bullpen, whatever it may be. Um, um, and when you have kind of those relationships, word spreads, man. And that's honestly, you know, most, if not all, of my career moves have been a result of someone reaching out to someone like that I report to, whether it's when I was an intern, obviously I had to my full time that I was interning under was my number one most important reference, and so he recommended me to different place. Then when I was at Texas, Coach Bishop reached out to Coach Roos, and boom, just like that. All right, hey, I got a guy who's going to work his ass off for you. Yada 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 yada. Next thing you know, I'm there. Go to basketball from Houston basketball to Houston baseball, and I think to me, the greatest compliment I ever gotten as a coach was when I told the team that I was leaving at the Houston baseball program to take this current position with the Mets. And one of our players, who was a walk on, came up to me, gave me a big old hug, and he just said, "You know what, coach? I want to thank you because it doesn't matter that I was a walk on. You treated me the same and you expected the same out of me than every other guy." And that really kind of stuck with me as I left. And so I've really tried to keep that same mentality and same approach, these last couple of years where, I truly care about every single guy, whether it's a guy who signed for $5 million, who we expect to be in the big leagues here in, the next maybe year or two, or a guy who maybe, was on the last year of his contract and, he's maybe only playing once a week. And we all know that he's, likely on his way out here soon. But it's my job to help every single one of the guys on my roster reach their potential as much as I can. And so just showing that you care about them, that's going to go a long way in you getting to wherever you want to be in your career, whether it's college, pro, private setting, doesn't matter. But just truly, dig yourself into wherever you are and be present in the moment, but also always keep your ear to the ground. And if you think that the next something available is going to be better for you, ultimately at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself and move on to, bigger, better things, as much as it may suck at times, but never look back. Just kind of keep always, trying to climb that ladder and pursue those dreams.
Nice, nice. So I know I said that was the last question, but here, this is the last one. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So like you mentioned, you mainly work with basketball and a little bit like Olympic sport before come to the baseball environment. So, um, do you think that kind of like help you grow as a strength coach, or let's say like a young strength coach who wants to be the NBA, he just stick with basketball. A young strength coach who want to be at the major league, he should stick with baseball. What are your thoughts on this?
For me personally, it definitely helped with my development and growth as a coach. Um, don't get me wrong, there are some phenomenal coaches who have only worked in their respective sport, and they have mastered their sport. Hats off to them. And I'm sure they can go out and coach every other sport at a very high level as well. But for me personally, I look at it as just the same as if I were to, so growing up, I played, basketball, baseball, soccer, football, um, a little bit of hockey here and there, nothing, competitive, but I would, suit up and go to the rink with my friends. But, all that kind of helped me become a more well-rounded athlete. It's kind of the same argument I feel like with, athletes. Do we want to specialize them and individualize them at an early age? Or do we want them to play 3 or 4 sports through high school and continue to develop? For me, that's kind of how I looked at my coaching, was having exposure to multiple different teams, multiple different demands of, energy system demands, um, you know, injuries that we need to be, accountable for, more cognizant of than maybe something else. Um, like going from just like even my little exposure I had with a swim and dive program at Texas when I was there for the summer, you know, just seeing some of the preventative stuff that they were doing for like concussions, for the divers. That's not something I would have never have thought about. But now it's something that, when I do work with other sports, I start to kind of have more of an open mind just because of that experience of seeing what some of these other coaches, and that's the other thing too, is I have been very fortunate to have worked not only under some great coaches, but a lot of great coaches. And again, there's a million ways to skin a cat. That's what Nicodemus told me when I was at Mizzou. And he actually kind of highly encouraged me to go and, do the position, take the position at Texas. Cause like, dude is like, you need to go learn from other coaches. He goes, cause I don't want you to go through your career thinking that my way is the only way to do things. And it's the only way to program and coach. There's a million ways to skin a cat. You need to take what you learn from all these different great coaches, blend them together into your own beliefs, and formulate your own opinions on training and coaching and programming from there. So yeah, I think a combination of learning from a bunch of different coaches and being exposed to different sports has truly had an enormous impact on my career and making me the coach I am.
Man, I love this. I love this. So, for those who are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
So my social media, my Twitter page is Coach Jake A. Allen. You can follow me there. My Instagram is Coach J A Allen, so JAALLEN. My middle initial A, so just kind of snuck that in there. Yeah, those are my two most active social media pages. I did recently start a YouTube channel. I'm trying to kind of funnel some stuff onto there. Um, the link will be in my YouTube channel. Probably throw the link in on here. It's Performance Coach Jake Allen is the name of my channel on there as well. But yeah, eventually I'm going to have a website here posted up in the next few weeks. So once I get that, that will be on all my social media pages as well.
Cool, cool. Love that. Love that. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's great chatting with you. Best